Chapter 14. Nickel Promises. Robbie was up late the next morning. What with all the hours of sleep the business of the sealskin had cost him. Breakfast was over by the time he showed face in the butt end, but nobody said a word in question of this, which made it certain, he decided, that he had not been missed from his bed the previous night. Quietly he helped himself to oat cakes and butter. Then, still fighting sleep, he sat munching his late breakfast and trying to remember everything about the instructions Jarl Corby had gave him on their way home from hiding the skin. All the rest of the family, meanwhile, sat around talking and taking their ease on the first day of the holidays, with all of them having turns at telling Finlayson what these would be like. "It's a great time of year, and no mistake," Peter remarked. And Janet agreed. "Aye, you'll have your fill of dancing these holidays, Finlayson, for the whole of Yule night is one big celebration, and it's the same at New Year in Uphellia. Besides which," Peter added, "you'll see something to surprise you at the end of it all, for Uphellia is also the night when all the young men go from house to house, dressed up in a sort of disguise, with white handkerchiefs tied like masks over their face." "What's the reason for that?" Finlayson asked. But Peter could not give any proper answer to this question. "It's just a custom," he said vaguely. "Guising, they call it, and the young fellows that dress up are called the guisers." Robbie came awake with a jerk then, for it was this very custom of guising, as it happened, which was at the heart of Jarl Corby's instructions. Moreover, he realized, Finlayson was clearly interested in it. "And how do these guisers dress up?" he was asking. "What do they wear?" "Petticoats," Peter answered, laughing. "Long petticoats made of straw, with tall, pointed hats of straw, white shirts, and everything all covered with bunches of colored ribbons. That's how daft they look, and it's a daft name they have too for the one that leads them in this foolery. The Scuddler, they call him, and you never saw such a wild dance as he commands from all the other guisers." "It sounds like an old custom to me, a very old custom," Finlayson remarked. And immediately the warning note in Robbie's mind sounded louder than ever. Quickly he rose and made for the door, but he was not to get away so easily as all that. "Aye, I'm sure I've told say as much," Peter was agreeing. "But it's Robbie you would need to ask about such things, for he was always the one that took in everything old said about them." Robbie had the door open by this time, but Peter's words had brought every eye to him, and so he still had to answer. "I don't know any more than my he mumbled to Finlayson. Then out he dashed before the guilty flush on his face could betray that this was a lie, for he could remember old talking to him of the Scuddler and his men. Fine, he could remember old saying there was an ancient magic behind their guising, and explaining the meaning of this magic to him. Even so, he excused the lie to himself. He dared not disobey any of Jarl Corby's instructions, and the very first of these had been that Finlayson must not be allowed to guess the least thing about the magic or its meaning. Running quickly, Robbie made good his escape from the house. The next of Jarl Corby's instructions went through his mind as he ran, and straightway he headed off in search of Nickel Anderson. Nor did he waste a moment in coming to the point with Nickel, once he had managed to track him down that morning. "There's a favor I want to ask you, Nickel," he began. "If it comes to a fight between you and Finlayson at Uphellia, I want you to promise me the fight will take place above high water mark." Nickel stared at this. "I'll not Elspeth go without a fight," he said. "That's one thing I can promise you. But what does high water mark have to do with it?" "Everything," Robbie told him. "Finlayson is a creature of the sea, and so all his power comes from the sea. But all that lies above high water mark belongs to the land, and so that is where you will be the stronger of the two." "So that's it," Nickel exclaimed. "You're still on about this nonsense of the Great Selkie." "Yes, I am," Robbie told him defiantly, "but I'm not asking any more for you to believe it. I just want you to do this as a favor for me, and there can't be any harm in that, surely." "No, I don't suppose there is," Nickel agreed. "It's just daft, that's all. But still, if it means so much to you, All right, Robbie. I'll fight him above high water mark. Robbie gave a sigh of relief. And there's just one more favor then I have to ask, he said. It's about the scuttler, Nickel. And what I want to know is this. Which of you fellows will play the part at this Appelia? That's a stupid question, isn't it? Nickel demanded. You know we always keep that a secret among ourselves. Of course I do, Robbie admitted. But there's another favor I want of you. Quickly then, but choosing his words so that Nickel could not guess who had prompted them, he went on to ask what Jarl Corby had told him to ask. Nickel's face grew more and more puzzled as he listened, but at the end of it, he said, I suppose I could manage that, provided all the other fellows agree, of course. Will you fix it with them then? Robbie pressed. Will you, Nickel? Nickel frowned. Why should I? He asked. You haven't given me any reason for it, have you? No, Robbie admitted, but I don't want Elspeth to choose Finlayson any more than you do, and I know this will give you the power to save her. You'll have to do better than that, Nickel remarked. For that just doesn't make sense to me. It does to me, Robbie told him swiftly. My old Da explained everything about the guising to me, and so I know it makes sense. Your old Da, said Nickel, was a storyteller, and so how could you tell whether he was speaking the truth about that, or whether it was just something he had made up? Robbie thought of Jarl Corby talking to him as they walked home from hiding the sealskin. There was an easy answer to Nickel's question, he realized, because Jarl Corby told me it was the truth. Nickel would have to believe him then, for no one could doubt Jarl Corby's knowledge of such matters. But then also, what would become of his own promise to keep silent about Jarl Corby? Old Da wasn't making up stories about the guising, he said at last. I know I'm right in that, although I can't tell you how I do know. And if you do as I ask, Nickel, I know it will give you the power against Finlayson. Nickel stared at him. You really do believe all that nonsense about the Great Selkie, he said. You're convinced of it, aren't you, Robbie? You know I am, said Robbie, biting his lip. And I really do believe Elspeth is in danger from him, which makes it very hard when you won't even take a chance on doing something to save her. Nickel hesitated, seemingly quite impressed by these last words, and Robbie rushed in to take advantage of this hesitation. Please, he begged, for old time's sake, Nickel. Nickel suddenly made up his mind. All right, he agreed, and even managed a smile on the words. If that's what it really takes to put your mind at ease, I'll fix it with the other fellows, for old time's sake, Robbie. Once more, Robbie sighed in relief. Fine, man, fine, he exclaimed. And don't forget what I said about high water mark. Keep above that mark on Appelia, and be sure you keep Elspeth above it too. Nickel smiled again, as if the whole idea had really begun to amuse him now that he had given in to it at last. His smile broadened until his face was like the big laughing sun it used to be before Finlayson came into his life. And clapping Robbie on the shoulder, he remarked, I'll say this for you, Robbie Henderson. I never met a lad with such a determined streak in him as you have. Besides which, even your old Da never had such a wild imagination as yours. Robbie laughed, thinking he did not care what anyone said of him now that he had got Nickel to fall in with Jarl Corby's plan. We'll see who's right about that this Appelia comes, he retorted, and took his leave of Nickel, feeling he could hardly wait for this to happen. It was not towards home he turned, however, but towards the schoolhouse, and he went round about so that no one would realize he was headed there. Cautiously, he knocked on the door of Jarl Corby's own button ben, and when the door was opened to him, he slipped in as quiet as a shadow. Did anyone see you come here? Jarl Corby shot at him. Robbie shook his head. I came round the back of the hill, he exclaimed, and it doesn't seem as if I was missed from home last night either. Good, Jarl Corby told him. And what about Nickel Anderson? I've spoken to him, Robbie answered triumphantly, and he's promised to do what you want on Appelia. But you didn't let him guess that I was behind the idea, did you? Jarl Corby asked. No, Robbie told him. I put it to Nickel exactly the way you said I should. Jarl Corby rubbed his hands and went back to sit in his chair by the fire. That's fine, he declared. That means nobody can possibly guess I'm mixed up in this, and so now I can really plan. Come here, boy.